Hey guys, it's No Drama here, and today we're going to be covering something that I didn't get a chance to cover in my last JsonUtility tutorial. So a lot of people have been requesting since I started that, requesting me do something about writing to a file and reading from a file. We're going to just start a new project, and in this project I'm going to be creating a new C# script, and this is going to be called the JSON file utility. And so in the JSON file utility, we'll create that, and we'll open that up and bring that on screen here. So the JSON file utility, just like we said in the last one, is not going to be a mono behavior because we're not going to be actually attaching it to a game object. So we're going to be creating a handful of functions today. The first one we're going to do is we're going to copy the one from our previous video, which is the read JSON as resource. So let me go get that. So here's the function we used last time, which is load JSON as resource, which just loads a resource from inside a text resource from inside the resource folder. Now we're going to be extending this a little bit today by adding a second one and then a way to switch between the two. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up with another function here. This one's going to be called public static string load JSON as external resource. So this one is going to also take a string path. But in this case, we're going to be using, because it is an external resource, we're going to be reading a file out of the Application.persistentDataPath. Now this path is a path that's specifically designed in Unity to be a readable, writable folder on all platforms. So we're going to be reading files and writing files to these persistent data path. Unity has this built-in persistent data path that, regardless of what we build on, it'll always go to a folder that we can read and write to. So the first thing we're going to do is actually take this path and we're going to append it with the application data path, because we know it's going to be inside the application persistent data path. So application CATION persistent persistent data path persistent data path plus path. So we're just appending it to the beginning. That's because in our previous example, our resources looked something like, let's say levels level 1 level.json, right? Something like this. So in this case, we want it to look the same thing, except we're going to be appending it with this persistent data path. Now, one of the things that I've run into before is that the persistent data path doesn't have a slash on the end. So we're going to make sure that we add a slash in between the persistent data path and the path. That way our URLs, our path links can look exactly the same regardless of if it's a resource or an external resource. So what we're going to do is then we're going to have a function that actually switches between the two of these, and we'll say public static string load JSON from file. Now this load JSON from file is not going to inherently be reading anything, but instead is going to take in a path, so string path, and then a string bool of is resource, right? So this is resource basically determines whether or not we use this or we use this. So if is resource, then we are going to say return load JSON as resource. And then we'll pass it the path, and then else we will return the load JSON as external resource with the path. And that way, all you have to do is change the is resource from true to false in order to be able to switch it from a resource to a non-resource. So now that we've gotten our path, we're going to need to do some file reading. So let's get into this. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to change our namespaces to include using system.io and using system.text. And that's because we're going to need both of these in order to read and write files. We're going to add both right now. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to need a file reader. We're also going to, before we do anything else, we're going to make sure that the file actually exists. So let's do an if not system.io file.exists. And this will ask us, this will return true if the file exists. So if the file doesn't exist, then we want to just return null, because we don't want to try to open a file that doesn't exist. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to open a stream reader. So stream reader, stream, we'll call it reader. Reader equals new stream reader path. So we're going to pass it in, and the stream reader is going to open a stream to our particular path. So then we're going to say while not reader dot end of file, I believe, or end of stream. So we're going to say while it's not the end of the stream, we're going to right above this we'll create a new string response equals a new string, and this is going to say response plus equals reader dot read line. And this will read a line from the reader and write it to the response so that we can then say return response. And that's it. This is reading from an external resource. So we'll go back to Unity here. And so now we're going to do a quick read tutorial. So we're going to make sure that we can read from a file. So let's create a new object here and then we're going to create a new C# script. And this is going to be called file test. And in our file test, we are going to, right above this, we'll make a quick struct, say public struct save game. Right? So this is a structure that contains save game information of some kind. So we'll make the system.serializable. And this will contain a public string name. So this will be like the player's name or something like that. So we want to read this in. So we're going to have a public save game. Oops. And this public save game save data is going to be where we load into. So on start, we're going to say load. So we're going to do save data equals JsonUtility from JSON, just like we did before. We'll say this is a save game type. And then we're going to say JSON file utility dot read load JSON. That's what it is. It's load JSON as from file. This is the new function that we created that has to take two parameters, which will be our string and then false, because we're going to be reading from an external resource folder. So this is going to say, we'll say like saves we'll say save.json for now. So all we're going to do is load a file called save.json. So now we have to go and create that file on the system. So here I've come to our local low file. I'm running on Windows, so this is the location of where application data path comes, our persistent data path comes to. In this case, we're coming to the JsonUtility tutorial folder, and we'll get rid of that, which is a previous test I did. So now that we are in this users John app data local low Snowdrummer games JsonUtility tutorial, this is where we need to create a new file called saves, right? Save.json. So let's create a new file here, and this new file is just going to contain a name, and it's going to say Snowdrummer, right? And that's all it's going to need to contain. So now we're just going to store that in our folder here as save.json, and there we go. So now we should be able to load our save.json into our save game. So let's go back to Unity here. Let this load, and then we're going to go to our game object. So we've created an empty game object here, and we'll drag file test to that, and you'll see that there's a save data value, but the name itself is empty. So now when we run the game, we will load the name into that field. And there we go. The name loads from an external resource into our save data field. So similar to our previous example, right? We have, just like we had with our JSON as resource, we now can load a file from an external resource, just like we did with a resource file. So now we want to write a structure back to the hard drive, right? We've played the game, we've modified the game somehow, and now we want to write that structure back to the system. Well, in this case, now we're going to want to save that data. So we're going to create a new function down here. We're going to call it public static void, because we're not going to need to return anything. Write I can't spell. Write JSON to external resource. So inside of our JSON to external resource, we're going to be writing the string to a file. So in this case, we're going to have a we're going to need to check. We're going to be overriding files. Sorry, we're going to be overriding files. So instead of saying instead of appending files, we're going to be overwriting them. So we just need to say stream writer stream equals sorry. Future John, edit this out. It's going to be file stream. So now we're going to be doing a we're going to need to write to the system. So we're going to need a file stream called stream, which is why I called it reader earlier. And we're going to say file dot create, and we're going to say path. So this will also take in a string path, just like before. And just like before, we're also going to append the application persistent data path, because we cannot write to the resource folder. We can only write to the persistent data path. So after we've created our file stream, then now we need to take in a content. So string content. So this will be the JSON string that we're going to be writing to the file. We'll use the JSON utility to create this string But for now, we're just going to be saying whatever is in this string, we're going to write it to a file. So for the file stream to work, we're going to need to convert it into bytes. So into a byte array, in fact, specifically. So let's create a byte array and call it content bytes equals, and now we're going to use the C# built-in UTF-8 string conversion object. So there's a built-in class, so it'll say new UTF-8 encode. I have to read exactly how this works. Encoding. And then this is going to take a true parameter. And then from here, we're going to say get bytes. And it's going to be our content. So what this is doing is this is taking our content as a UTF-8 string and converting it into a byte array that we can store into our content bytes. And then finally, all we need to do is say stream.write, and our stream, we can now write the bytes, so content bytes. We're not offsetting it, and so we'll say 0, and then we'll say content bytes.length. And that's it. This writes to wherever our path is. So this will override whatever file is there with another file. So let's go back to our file test. And in this case, we're not going to be saving data. We're going to be taking this save data object, which will define in the editor all the values, and then we're going to write that to the file. So let's say, since we're writing it, we can say JsonUtility, and instead of from JSON, it'll be to JSON, and we will take our save data. And that will be a string, so this will be string save data string equals JsonUtility to JSON save data. So this will take our structure, our serializable structure, and turn it into a string of JSON data. Now we can say, we can use our JSON file utility, and instead of load JSON from file, we were going to say write JSON as, was it write JSON to? Yes, write JSON to external resource. I'll just copy and paste the name here. And now we're going to be writing a JSON string to the external resource, which we will say is save data string. So with this, all we have to do is define in the editor some information in save data, and it will write that data to our JSON file. And to prove it, we will go back to our editor here. Nope. No overload message takes one argument. Did I miss something? Oh, right. We need to set our path, which is going to be save.json and our save data string. Sorry, I forgot to write the path in there. So now we go back to Unity, and we'll see that our file test script is up here, but our name is blank. In this case, I'm going to say the name is John, which is my name, and then we're going to run the program. It'll run perfectly fine, no errors or anything like that, but then we're going to come down here and we're going to go back to our JSON file in our app local Snowdrama Games JsonUtility tutorial. We'll open it up, and there we go. I've written my name to the file instead of the Snowdrama that was originally in here. And there you have it. There's file reading and writing from an external resource, specifically the Application.persistentDataPath. Now, this is going to be the first part of a two-part thing where I cover reading and writing. Specifically, in the next one, we're going to be cover writing dictionaries to the Application.persistentDataPath, because dictionaries. So if I were to say stick a dictionary in this structure, I wouldn't be able to. This toJSON function would not actually take that dictionary and write it to the file. It wouldn't actually convert it, serialize it into this string. And so we're gonna have to do a little bit more work before we call this JSON utility to JSON, but we'll do that in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like the video, leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more programming videos or some of my gameplay. And yeah, I will see you guys later. Peace out.